Hello friends, welcome to the lecture on control statements in Perl. There are 6 different types of control statements: if, for each, while, until and do while. If and else are not basically loops, but they are just a control structure which actually evaluates a particular condition, and based on the condition it performs the code execution that is present in the block. It is not necessary or mandatory to have an else if and else block for along with the if block. Moving to the next is for loops. These are the looping structures. For loop is basically a loop with 3 conditions. The first condition, that is the init, is executed only once right at the start of the for loop. The second and the third condition is continuously evaluated till the life cycle of this particular for loop. Depending on this particular condition, that is, the for loop will move on and will execute till this condition holds true. The increment and decrement is done for the init condition or for the init variable that is being defined in the for loop. Next is the for each loop. For each loop is very powerful loop that is used for traversing arrays and hashes. We'll look into these loops in detail by taking various examples. So let's move on to the example section now. So let us first write an example for the if statement. So let us say I would ask the user to probably enter a number, and what we'll do here is we'll simply go ahead and match that particular number in the program. So I'm taking the input into $num. Now I would say if $num is equal to 5, print it's a bingo. So this is the end of our if block. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and execute this particular program and see what exactly the output would look like. So if I say 5, I'll get the output as it's a bingo. So this particular if statement has helped us to match or to evaluate a particular condition. Now what if I pass any other number? So I've not got any output. So here this is slightly confusing. So we can simply add an else block. This particular else block will capture all those statements or conditions which will not be holding true for this particular condition. So simply say print try again. We close our else block. Now what will happen is if we pass any other number, it will go into the try again statement, or it will print this particular try again statement. Why? Because we have written an else block for our if block. Now as we said, we can have multiple conditions also. So let's say I want to write an else if block. I'll simply do an else if and I'll write a condition or an expression here saying, for example, match it equal to 10. If this happens, then simply go ahead and say it's a match, and I'll close this particular loop here. So now if I enter 10, you can see it has gone into this particular condition. So it first tried to evaluate this particular condition. It failed here. So then it evaluated the second condition that was available and it got a match here. So it printed this particular statement. If this particular statement or if this particular condition was also not true, then it would have simply executed the else block. So I hope this particular if else structure is pretty much clear now. let's move on to the for loop. So for loop, as we discussed, let's go ahead and print the numbers from 1 to 10. So to write a for loop for this particular for this particular logic, what we'll do is we'll simply say for inside this the init condition, that would be, let's say the for loop variable is $I. Now as we want to print it from 1 to 10, so I would simply say $I is equal to 1. Now it will move from it will go to 10. So the condition would be $I is less than equal to 10 and $I plus plus. What we'll do is, instead of printing, let's actually go ahead and multiply each of these numbers that we'll get here. So what we'll do, we'll simply go ahead and say $result is equal to $I star $I. So we are basically taking a square, we are actually multiplying the same number by itself, and we'll print something like this, $I $result. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what exactly we'll get as our output. Just forgot to mention my here, and this will now work properly. So if you see, we have got the square root of each of these numbers. So this is how a for loop works. Now let's go ahead and see for each loop. For this, let us define an array variable. Inside this array variable, we'll have some data 10, 20, 30. Now to traverse this particular array variable, what we'll do is we'll understand the English, or we'll understand the basic English for the for each loop. What I mean here is the meaning of for each in English language. We'll try to decode that, and we'll simply construct the sentence here. So it says for each element in array. So instead of in, what we'll do is we'll give round braces and in @arr. Now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and print each of these elements here. So print $element. Let's go ahead and execute our program. I'm sorry. Now if we go ahead and print or execute the program, so you can see we have got the output of the array as 10, 20 and 30. So this is how a for each loop works. Let us again revisit what we have done today, or in this lecture. We have seen the if loop, or we have seen the if control structure, which basically evaluates a particular condition. You can have an else if block and an else block associated with an if block. If not, you can standalone have an if block. Next is the for loop. The for loop basically evaluates this particular condition on every pass, and if this holds true, then it executes the statement that are inside this particular loop. If not, it comes out of that loop and it moves to the next statement in the program. So in this case, it will move to this particular statement. For each loop, this particular condition is evaluated only once, that is right at the start of the program. After that, this is incremented till the time this particular condition holds true. It will keep on moving. Next is the for each loop. This is one of the most important features of Perl, and this will be extensively used when you need to actually traverse an array or a hash. To actually write a for each loop, understand the English meaning of for each. So for each means each element. So for each element in @arr. So in is replaced by round braces, and you can simply get each element, or you can get the value of each element inside this particular scalar variable. So inside the curly braces, you can write your code here. In this case, we have simply printed each of these elements. So this comes to the end of our first lecture in control statements. I'll see you at the next lecture with the remaining loops.